Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking out the time to join me today. My name is Akshay Bhalla, and I'm here to talk with you about secret to product success, mastering measurability. So, if you are a product manager or part of a team that's building impactful products for the customers, this session is for you. Here is an overview of what I'll cover today. We will start with an understanding of what measurability means in product context and how to use it effectively to measure user value. Then we'll talk about applying measurability across different product lifecycle stages. And lastly, we'll discuss some ways you can create the culture of measurability within your own product teams. So let's dive in. Before we start, a quick introduction about myself. I was born and raised in India, where I completed my engineering and started my career as a software engineer. Over the last 12 plus years, I've transitioned over multiple product roles across organizations like Meta, EY, and PwC. Currently, I'm a product manager at Stripe, where I lead the charter for observability products. These are the tools that provide Stripe's top customers with actionable insights into their integration and payment health, ensuring peak performance and reliability for them. Now, let's talk about how you can master the measurability, art of measurability for your products. Let's start by understanding what measurability means in product context first. Measurability, as I define it, is ensuring that the product delivers tangible, consistent, and measurable value to our customers. It really isn't about what product teams can learn or improve, but more about making sure that our customers are getting the value that we have promised to them. For instance, if you're building a technical product, reliability metrics like uptime or response times don't really mean just smooth operations for them, but actually they mean like, hey, we have your trust and the customers can actually trust us. If your SaaS tool tracks, let's say, feature adoption, it tells you whether the customers are finding and using what's most valuable to them. Ultimately, by focusing on measurability tied to these customer outcomes, what we are saying is that your success is our success. It ensures that every improvement that we are making, every feature that we're shipping, and every issue that we are addressing translates into a better user experience. So, hence, the bottom line here is always work back from the user needs. Always. Now, building on this definition, let's explore how it directly translates into user value. The first thing is measurability needs to align with the customer goals. Metrics like, let's say, completion rates or return of investment tells us whether the users are actually achieving the outcomes that they really care about. If not, then it's a signal for us to adjust our product roadmap and like really iterate on that to bring the user value into center. Second, it needs to drive continuous improvement. And by that, what I mean is by really deeply analyzing these actionable metrics like CSAT scores, feature adoption, and let's say usability data, we can really focus on the changes that matter the most to our customers and really enhance their experience over time. Next is reliability, which is like one of my most favorite topics. I truly believe that reliability is the cornerstone of the user value, especially for technical products. Metrics like uptime or error rates aren't really just like technical benchmarks. They're assurances that the customers can depend on a product when it actually counts. It also provides transparency. And a great example of this is observability tool. So when a user can really track the system's performance and usage metrics over real time, they feel empowered and in control, making your product even more valuable to them. And I personally know because I'm working on one of such products and like I can see the value that it is driving for the users. Finally, measurability builds trust. When the customers can see the improvements based on the real data tied to their needs, it reinforces that their success is at the center of every decision that we are making. And ultimately, that is really the true purpose of measurability, that we ensure that we are always working back from our users. Think about it for a second. How many times have you given some sort of feedback to a product and actually translated into an improvement, right? That is your aha moment. Oh, I asked for it and it actually happened. Imagine that user satisfaction driven on every decision that you have made over time. This is the fun part. When it comes to measurability, one size doesn't fit all, right? Different products and industries and users require different approaches to defining and tracking success. And by now, we all know that frameworks do not always really work, right? I mean, they do at times, but you have to, on the ground, roll with the punches as the products evolve and the user needs change. However, I have found one particular framework very helpful when it comes to measurability. So let's talk about that. It's called the Pirate Metrics or the R framework by Dave McClure. So, what is this framework? The R stands for acquisition, activation, retention, referral, and revenue. Now, these are just guidelines and that you can actually pick and apply based on which product stage your product is in. And we'll talk about that as well. Let's start with what it means. Acquisition focuses on how users have discovered your product. It's about creating awareness and driving the engagement to bring the users in. Next step is the activation. And that is the moment where users have actually experienced the core value that your product was supposed to provide them. Think about it like their aha moment. Hey, oh, this is exactly what I was looking for. The next important step is retention. Once you have acquired the customer and really activated them on your product, retention ensures that users continue to return and engage, indicating product's long-term relevance and value to them. It's super important to track it at all times. Next is referral, which actually captures how your users are becoming advocates and helping your product grow organically through the word of mouth. Next is revenue. So revenue is like once we have like figured out there's a strong product market fit, we are able to activate users, we are able to retain them and actually like promote them organically. That's where we like begin to monetize this. So revenue represents business value. How effectively your product is driving monetization and sustainability. Okay. Now let's talk about how this framework fits into different product stages. Let's start by discussing what these product stages are. Okay. Broadly, there are three main product stages: early stage, growth stage, and maturity. I know like there can be more. There can be some in like early growth, there can be some in like early maturity. But at a high level, every product can be placed into one of these stages. So let's start with the early stage. At this stage, the goal is to validate that the product that you have built is solving a real problem and delivering true value to your users. The focus in this stage is on acquisition and activation of the users, ensuring that the users are discovering the product and reaching their aha moment as soon as possible. At this stage, what you should be asking yourself is, are the users able to really experience the core value quickly? Are we solving the right problem for them? The priority in this stage is learning and iterating to build confidence in your product's direction. That will set the stage on how you want to grow the product and where you want to take it eventually. Is your vision working? Is your first milestone, that is like getting the users to use your product, achieved? So all of that is defined in the early stage of every product. Next to the growth stage. As the product gains traction, the focus shifts to deepening user engagement and driving retention. Here, it's super critical to measure whether the users are coming back and continuing to rely on your product or not. At this point, you should be asking whether the product is delivering consistent and repeatable value that keeps the user engaged over time. Retention, in reality, becomes the strongest indicator of long-term success at this stage. So understanding where and why the user drop off is actually key to retain them over period. Once you have figured out the funnel and where the drop-offs are happening for the users, you can actually fix that with product features and solutions and help them retain over time, eventually like taking from growth to the maturity stage. Next is the maturity. So now that you have like gone through like multiple phases, seen the users adopt and use your product, seen your product go from 1 to 100, in the maturity stage, the focus shifts to maximizing profitability and advocacy. So at this point, the revenue metrics like customer lifetime value, ARR, MRR, average revenue per user, these are the metrics that become the most critical ones alongside referral metrics, which actually drive the word of mouth growth. Now, this whole life cycle approach ensures that the metrics that you're prioritizing evolve alongside your product's growth, keeping the focus sharp and like heavily user centric. Now, let's talk about some of the common traps when it comes to measurability. The first one is focusing on vanity metric. Okay. One of the most common mistakes that I see product teams making is prioritizing the metrics that look impressive, but really do not provide any actionable insights. Let's take an example. Tracking app downloads or website traffic might seem exciting. It's always exciting to see the numbers go up. But if those numbers don't really translate into active usage or customer retention, they aren't really meaningful. They make you happy. They give you a false hope that the product is doing what it's supposed to do, but not really helpful to grow or increase the user impact. Always ask yourself, does this metric help me understand whether the product is delivering the value for our users? Instead, focus on the actionable metrics like activation rates, like feature adoption, or let's say task completion rate, or let's say onboarding timings, which really directly tie back to the user outcomes. Next is overcomplicating dashboards and metrics. While it is super tempting to track everything, yes, like we want to make sure that like we have fancy dashboards and we have a lot of data that we have gathered from different types of instrumentation. Not all data is useful. Overloading your teams with too many metrics can really lead to analysis paralysis. Instead, focus on the handful of key metrics that reflect the most critical aspects of your product's performance and user impact. Again, I can't insist on this enough. Always work back from your user needs and the value that you're trying to provide to the user. Keep it simple and actionable, and your team will really thank you for it. Next is ignoring qualitative insights. What I mean by that is uh, the metrics and the data that we collect are very helpful and very essential. However, they do not tell you the whole story. Qualitative data that you have gathered tells you what's happening, but the qualitative insights that you have collected via user interviews or support tickets often reveal why the user is behaving or using your product the way they are doing it. Now, pairing this quantitative data through instrumentation with qualitative insights is what really creates a complete picture of how the product is actually performing in real life. And this really isn't like a set it and forget it task. These metrics need to evolve as your product and users need change. So regularly visit them and refine your success metrics to ensure that it still is relevant and meaningful to what you're trying to do. Last is neglecting to communicate these results to your teams. Even when you're tracking the right metrics, failing to share the results with the stakeholders can really undermine the value of your efforts. So, a strong culture of measurability requires transparency, both in celebrating wins and addressing the areas for improvement using the data that you have gathered. So, use the dashboards, reports, and visualization that you have created to make the data accessible and actionable for your team and leadership. Like Think about this data as your friend. Data wins arguments. Whenever you're trying to make a case for a new product feature, or when you're trying to make a case for a new opportunity, use and leverage this data to your benefit to sell it better. Like demonstrate the impact uh, through this data and demonstrate the opportunity size through this data. So data will become your friend at that point to communicate the value that you're trying to provide to the users. Now that we have defined what exactly measurability is and discussed its common pitfalls, let's talk about how you can actually use this and build a culture of measurability within your product teams. As product managers, we are the champions of the user value at all times, right? And measurability is one of the most powerful tools to ensure that the user value is consistently being delivered. And here are some ways in which you can help build this culture within your team. The first thing is measurability needs to be championed from the beginning. It should never be an afterthought. So very often teams launch features and only then ask, like, how do we measure if this worked? This is backward. So success metrics definition should be a requirement in the product design phase itself. So defining the metrics even before even a single line of code is written, that will be super impactful to drive changes and like measure success over time. So at this point, you should be asking questions like, what are the problems that we're solving to the user, and how do we know that we have actually solved it successfully? Second, foster the culture of cross-functional alignment through measurability. Making success metrics a shared mindset across engineering, design, and other cross-functional teams can really help you over the period of your product's lifecycle. So when engineers really understand that their work directly impacts a measurable user outcome, like let's say response times or reducing the number of errors over the period, it really creates a deeper connection to the product's mission. And like as a PM, your one of the most important jobs is to create a compelling vision for your product that keeps the team motivated over the period of time and really like keeps them engaged and become your mercenaries. Third, always and always lead by an example. If you won't do it and you'll just preach it, like essentially team will not adopt it. Sometimes being an advocate for measurability means really rolling up your sleeves. I personally built metrics and dashboards in SQL and like visualization tools like Tableau, Grafana multiple times just to demonstrate how actionable insights can drive better decisions for the users. By showing your team what what exactly is possible, you are encouraging them to prioritize and value the data driven thinking. So, as PMs, never be scared to get your hands dirty, understand the data, play with it, and I promise you'll start enjoying it once you see the results coming out of it and like really data driving the decisions that you make. Integrating measurability into everyday processes. What I say is make it a habit. Incorporate these metrics into your product requirement documents, sprint goals, feature reviews, everything. Use these dashboards and visualizations to make decisions and get buy-in. For example, if you're shipping an onboarding flow, let's say uh, defining success as specifically as let's say 80% of the users should complete onboarding within first 24 hours, right? Post launch. Revisit that data and iterate and improve the results over time. That gives you a benchmark on like where you started and where you want to go and like how the journey looks like in the between. Finally, you need to recognize that this is a long-term shift in the mindset, and building the culture of measurability takes time. Initially, it might feel like an extra effort, but over a period, it'll become second nature for the team to consider metrics in every context. Whether they're debugging a system, shipping a feature, planning a roadmap, doing prioritization, everything will become data driven over the period. Ultimately, this culture of measurability aligns your entire team around the same goal. It becomes a thread that really connects every decision to clear and measurable outcomes. In other words of Peter Drucker, an author I really admire, by the way, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Measurability is what empowers us to turn a vision into reality, one metric at a time. And with that thought, I hope you enjoyed this session and thank you for joining.